Markham.
Here.
Mark Ferry.
Here.
Steve Ballage.
Here.
Amanda Cook. Here. Jacqueline Trainier. Rachel Ventura. Tom Weigel.
Here. Steve, if you want to lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty. First up, we have approval of minutes for our January 14th meeting.
Motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have our new business. First up, we have zoning case ZC-19-067, which is a zoning map amendment from A1 to I1 in Green Garden Township, commonly known as 24405 S LaGrange Rd Frankfort, Illinois, County Board District Number 2. This one was tabled last month, so we'll need a motion to remove it from the table.
Motion.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so who's going to give us the rundown here?
So, Mr. Chairman, being that you're already familiar with the case, as you mentioned at the January 14th Land Use Development Committee meeting, the committee voted to table the case to allow Frankfort to complete their 1.5-mile review, which they initiated in December, pending the because of the receiving their application on December 21st of that year. And the Village of Frankfort issued a legal objection to the map amendment on January 22nd, 2019, which has been forwarded to the committee in a memo dated February 5th, 2020. And you have that.
Does the committee have any questions for public speak?
I had a question.
Rachel,
We had talked about creating a new zoning case and looking at, we didn't define it, an agriculture, industrial blend. Did staff get a chance to look at any of that or no?
Variance.
Oh,
So that matter was just assigned to the committee for discussion today, so that discussion hasn't even happened yet to see where the committee wants to go.
Okay, because I do feel that this is a case that would fit well there, and I don't know if the applicant's willing to wait. I know that when we discussed it last month, there was some discussion of special use or other uses for that. So, I'm interested to hear what other people say, but I do know that setting precedents is, I think important in this case, and I'm nervous to approve this as industrial when it's surrounded by agriculture.
Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much what Rachel just said, and we agree. And, I'd just like to figure out what kind of zoning we can have that would change what, like Jim Moose has suggested a commercial zoning, and Rachel, she suggested industrial zoning. But I think we should have the land, I don't know if you want to table this or you want to keep going with it, but I'm thinking that if the people involved get with land use and they can get together and come up with a solution with the new zoning, that would be a lot better than, because if everybody in this group votes yes, it's still probably going to fail at the county board because they need 20 votes. So, I want to see some kind of resolution that works for everybody. And I think what Rachel brought up, and Jim followed up with it, that it's just a matter if you want to do a commercial or industrial or what's included in that new one.
Mixed use.
So I don't know the procedure for this. Is there something where we should just say, let's table it for another month and let the parties get together and discuss it? Or do we proceed to vote on this thing and move it to the board and then it'll fail? And then we'll end up in a lawsuit that we'll probably lose. So I don't know the answer. So our chairman, tell me what to do.
Well, I'm going to, since people did sign up to speak on it, we're going to Nobody make any motions at the table, please, because I want to.
Well, I'm just asking, I know.
I mean, we'll see how, I think staff is prepared to go forward. If the applicant's prepared to move forward, then we'll see. But Amanda?
I did speak to Janine beforehand, and I'm going to have her reiterate what she said to me, to the group. I asked about the special use permit. So this exists with the special use right now. So I was asking about how this special use permit moves forward. Does it move forward with a new tenant? Does it move forward with a new owner? And how that works. So take it away.
I'll just come to the podium.
Thank you.
So just to answer some of your questions and concerns, staff did meet with the applicant, and we also met with the Village of Frankfort. I believe it was a week or two ago now. So we talked about the proposed, a new zoning district. We talked about potentially commercial zoning district, other types of uses. And I can let the applicant's attorney speak for them, but there was the consensus that the applicant wants to move forward with the industrial zoning at this point. They do not want to wait, the several months that it could potentially take in order to have a text amendment go through for a new zoning district to be created. So that was the decision that came out of that meeting that we just had. In regards to the special use, so the property was approved for a special use permit for a landscaping business a number of years ago. Sorry, I don't have that in front of me. And the special use would still be valid as long as it hasn't been abandoned for a continuous period of 1 year or more. We've spoken with the applicants about that because staff has gone out to the site and it didn't seem from that appearance that the use was still occurring. So we would just need some sort of proof that the use is still ongoing on the property in order to say for sure, definitively, that special use permit has not been abandoned and is still valid. So potentially, a new tenant could move into the building, could move onto the property and operate a landscaping business under that special use.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions? Tom?
What happens to the buildings if we don't approve the special use or the industrial zoning? The buildings that are there, they can't use them anymore? Do they have to abandon them?
No, the buildings can remain. There are uses allowed in the A1 zoning district where those buildings could be utilized for that. So let's say if someone wanted to operate a wholesale nursery on the property, and I know a nursery was actually operating there as well, the buildings could be used for that nursery business. From my understanding, there's an office inside the structure, maybe some storage going on, so it could go for different uses that are already permitted in that zoning district.
So let's say the board wanted to have a blended option going forward. One being so that the applicant can get a business in there, they wanted to move forward with a special use. And then while that's happening, we could also look at a potential new zoning category. So, because this is not the last case, I'm sure that we will see similar situations. So I do think it's prudent that we move that route at some point. My question then is, what would be the process that you talked about that they had to show that wasn't abandoned? Like, how long is that process if they wanted to start? What would be step one so that they could make sure that it's happening in a timely manner? And then also, what would be about the timeline it would take to create a new zoning category? So at some point, maybe they wanted to move over to that zoning, we would know what that would look like.
Sure. So in order to show that the special use for the existing special use for the landscape business hasn't been abandoned, we would basically be asking for who is the new tenant that's on the property, what's the name of their company. We may give them a call, we may get something, email confirmation, written confirmation that they've been operating or their lease started on X date, just so we know that it's been in constant operation. Sometimes people give us real estate ads as well, saying that the property has been actively marketed as such, as a landscape business. There's no intent to abandon that they still want the landscape business to continue. They just may be running into some difficulty finding a tenant, for example, or selling the property. So that's actually just, some paperwork to our office. We take a look at it, review it, and get back to them. That's a very quick administrative type internal process. The text amendment, so for the new zoning district, That would require being, assigned to staff, so we'd have to do some research, get feedback from the committee, see what other counties are doing, perhaps other municipalities, to look for what might fit what we are looking to achieve here. Then there would be, potentially some back and forth with some draft language about that. And then we would actually have the public hearing on the proposed language. So everyone would get together and say, okay, this is the one that we want to move forward with. Then we would have the public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission, Land Use and Development Committee, and then final approval by a county board. So that would be a several-month process to go through that.
And with the first one, once they were able to show you that they had advertised this property as such, are we talking about like less than a month then? Do they have to do anything else to get that special use?
No, it would just, it would just be receiving, myself, we would receive some information, look into it, verify it. I mean, it would take like a week.
So that might be the best path forward in this case, possibly, the fastest at least.
And that would be up to the applicant to decide how they would want to proceed.
Any other questions? All right, we did have 2 people sign up. First up, we have Michelle Tracy.
Where are you going?
Okay, come on down.
Yes, Ryan, on behalf of the applicant, Michelle Tracy, who I have here with me. In answer to a couple questions in the inquiries about the landscaping and the special use, there has been, for a portion of the property, continuous processing of black dirt, topsoil black dirt, has been continuous in doing that. We don't believe that there's abandonment. We have an 18,000 square foot building there, and our realtor, commercial realtor Mark Haney, has been trying to market that, and market to landscape companies for the last couple of years, without avail. And as far as timelines, there were some questions about timelines. We filed the application here on September 19th. I notified Frankfort by email on September 24th. Zach Brown from Frankfort acknowledged that on September 27th. As you know, we've said it here before, I don't reiterate too much, but we had unanimous support at Green Garden, no neighbors objecting. I know a lot of board members are concerned when there are neighbors objecting. We had none. And after the September, I was here before this committee and then the full county board for the property. It's a little blurry on the map. You can see the blue triangle. Our property is where that star is. And so if you look to the right there, where that I-1 parcel, I was here for that parcel. That's just across, that yellow is the high tension lines from this property. That property was zoned I-1 in September 2016 with no objection from Frankfort, unanimously by this county board. Okay? And so I was here in November, as I said, for a special use permit with United Rentals, the world's largest equipment rental company, 14 billion in equipment, publicly traded, and no objection from Frankfort. Not a single negative vote. Full support again from Green Garden. So we're further away now from Frankfort, over 1.25 miles. That request, as I said, received unanimous approval in November. In December, Frankfort passes their new comprehensive plan. Remember, we filed in September. Passes their new comprehensive plan. Says, oh, no, we have a legal objection to this. You shouldn't have I-1 there. We were looking at a greenfield section to the north that was rezoned I-1. This is an existing 18,000 square foot building. Now, Michelle's not United Rentals. She's a wife, a family member who built a business here for over 20 years. They developed this. This is their life's work. It's their savings. And as her husband fell ill and horrible illness, and he's here today, thankfully with us, something that a lot of us families have to deal with, they've looked for extra income. And they have partial income property, a little bit, where they can process dirt, landscaping-related use, but they haven't building that they've tried to market. Again, we have no objectors. And if you look at that, and there's other, I know you were provided materials beyond this, we have here, the southern border of Frankfort, along Railway Road, all along Route 45. If you look out the village hall, you can see it, because I want to know 2 uses. So this is their life. They're trying to get some income out of it. Michelle is now, her husband can no longer run that business, a business they spent their life building. And this is their response to get from the village of Frankfort over a mile and a quarter away. It's not our neighbors. And they didn't object to the billion-dollar company north. They're simply trying to get some income out of it. Now, as far as another category, we looked at C2 uses. Commercial realtor, and he can answer questions about this, but we've got two interested users, very interested users, a wetlands restoration and maintenance company, a vehicle upfitting company where you put the buckets on trucks and such, that would fit in I-1. They wouldn't fit in C2 or anything like that. But that, again, is a whole other process. And this process doesn't need to be tabled or changed in order to do that. You have to file a separate application. And we talked about this with Janine last week. And that would be the truth for if it's a new zoning category that's started. We have to file brand new. We have to republish. We have to refile. This doesn't need to be tabled. What this needs to do is be approved. These people have nowhere to go. Again, this is not United Rentals. This is not the Real Estate Investment Trust that I was here for in November. This is a family from Green Garden who gets along with their neighbors at harvest festivals for them, have them come, has the full support of the Green Garden Township Plan Commission, the full support of the Green Garden Township Board, where we sit by over a mile and a quarter from Frankfort's nearest boundary. And I have a vulnerable client this time. I didn't need it last time. I had a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. But when there are those members of our community that are local who aren't seeking to put anything egregious here, that are right across the high wires from existing uses, the same zoning, you have it in your power to either help them or hurt them. And I'm just asking to help.
Anything else? All right, does anybody else want to speak on this case? Steve.
Yeah, I like the clarification that he gave that the property, everything was okay when he filed. And then I said that at the last meeting, and then we got a different statement made that Frankfort was against it all along. And now it's, so, you know, I don't know which is A or B. Was the permit that when they went for this thing in September, that's before December. So, I mean, that's like, to me, the biggest thing going. I mean, if you apply for something and it's okay with everybody, and then a couple months later they say it ain't okay after you already paid the money and you're already going through the process, that's where I got a problem. You know, and then now I'm hearing, like Janine said about the real estate, you know, for sale, and they're saying it's been for sale for years. So maybe that's the answer. They just showed it, it's been for sale for years and it's all gone away. I mean, I don't really know, but I mean, this is a troubling deal for me.
Amanda?
I do agree that the Frankfort comprehensive plan changing is problematic, but I will say that I looked at it the first time in early spring last year, so it's not like they were hiding this comprehensive plan and they just had this big unveiling. I mean, it was online. I looked at it multiple times, and it is frustrating because they're changing. They originally kind of had this as an industrial corridor, and then they changed it to want it to be an agricultural corridor. I'm not in favor of changing something to industrial in the middle of agricultural, because even though the current owners have the best intentions, we don't know what the next owner is going to do with it. So I'm not a big fan of that. I do feel like as you've been actively marketing it, that this should still be an active special use permit, and there's still lots of things like Janine talked about that you can do on the property. My big concern was that the buildings need to be torn down, or this would be totally worthless property, and she was able to assuage some of my concerns with that. So that's just coming from the person that lives not too far from there. You know, this is my district. I would like to try to work with the Village of Frankfort for their vision for this corridor versus, you know, saying, well, you know, you changed your mind, you're not allowed to do that. And I also want to help the residents. So when I know that you can still use a special use, that's important to me. If that was different, this would be a different conversation for me. Perhaps if you are able to sell it or rent it, you know, and we do come up with another category that might fit better, And that might be something to pursue in the future. And if you don't want to, I mean, I'm going to be a no today. I'll be clear with you. I'm going to be a no. I don't like the idea of putting the industrial in the middle of agricultural. So.
Anything else?
I could respond to that just briefly. Just a clarification as far as the Village of Frankfort comprehensive plan. And I have my email to Zach and his response to me, Zach Brown, Village of Frankfort, in September. The prior comprehensive plan they had didn't support industrial here either. He says that in his email. Nonetheless, they didn't object to the I-1 across the power lines closer to them. They did not object in November to heavy equipment sales and rentals in an I-1 closer to them. So that's the case as far as that goes. As far as a landscape company, if Mr. Koenig, commercial realtor experience, could have rented this to a landscape company, he would have done that a year ago. That's a very limited market, especially for a building. I mean, if you look at the size of this, it's 18,000 square feet. It's overhead. There's not too many landscape companies that size. Maybe Allied, and they've got the building, but
I guess, when it comes to other levels of government, Frankfort, what they should or should not have done, we can't control that, unfortunately. And you're right, maybe they should not have approved their, they should have maybe put an objection in for that other one, all right? But they didn't, and so I don't know why. And yes, maybe you're right, they should have objected early on. Perhaps they were waiting for their plan to be finalized before giving legal objection, I'm not sure. But we can't comment on that. But our board has to be responsible for moving forward and making sure that we're not setting bad precedents. And I think that's the point that we're trying to make here, is that we want to help the homeowner here. We want to find a way forward, whether it's creating a new zoning category so that she can get more businesses in here, or it's approving the special use so she can immediately find some type of financial solution there. We're not trying to block her. But we have to think of all the other residents too. And this area, Will County, is continuing to have a warehouse issue. And so by this board just continuing to approve I-1 zoning as is in agriculture areas, we further that problem. Because of the next applicant who comes here is going to say, well, there's an I-1 here and an I-1 there, and why can't I have my I-1? And at some point, we have to say, well, we need to be responsible in our planning too. And every month, the staff can tell you, I have asked for a new comprehensive zoning plan, a new comprehensive plan for Will County. And I've been told it's going to cost $1 million and take time to do so, and we don't have it in our budget right now. And I'll be pushing forward for it to be in our budget for the future so that we don't have these ongoing problems of fighting. Where can we have warehouses at? Where can we have agriculture? Where can we have homes at? But in the meantime, we can't approve things in a vacuum. We do have to look at the long-term effects of what our decisions are. And so we are trying hard to work with the applicant in moving forward with either a different category of zoning or a special use so that she can find financial help. But we also want to make sure everybody else in this area has their livelihood upheld too, their health aspects upheld too. And just allowing industrial all over our county and allowing warehouses to be built everywhere is not the way to go. And I'm not saying that's what she's doing, but it could create a dangerous precedent, and we do have to take that into account here on this board. I will be a note today as well.
I understand your position. I just want to make clear that in order for a new zoning category to be created, and even if one were, we would have to apply to start from scratch. So tabling this doesn't do any good towards that.
So there's nothing else, and we'll need a motion to approve the zoning map amendment from A1 to I1.
I'll make the motion.
Been moved and seconded. We'll do a roll call for this one.
Tyler Markham,
No.
Mark Ferry,
No.
Steve Ballage,
Yes.
Amanda Cook,
No.
Rachel Ventura,
No.
and Tom Weigel.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion does not carry. All right, next up, we have zoning case ZC -19-080, which is St. John Evangelical Lutheran Church, who are seeking a variance for minimum setback of a dynamic sign face from a residential structure from 300 feet to 296 feet in Washington Township, commonly known as 28054 South Gates Avenue, Beecher, Illinois.
Motion?
Motion and a second, everyone, good luck.
Before we
didn't talk about it, we're supposed to put it on the floor, so.
All right, so who wants to
Okay.
do that?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. CC 19080 is two requests, one for a special use permit for an on-premise dynamic display in agricultural and residential zoning districts, as well as a variance for minimum setback of a dynamic display sign face from a residential structure from 300 feet to 296 feet. In 2000, the county board approved special use permit 4798-SV for the religious assembly use accompanied by a variance for minimum street yard setback, which brought the existing church building and use into compliance. The applicant seeks to modify an existing illuminated sign by adding a new illuminated identification header and a dynamic display at the center of the sign. The applicants have applied for the building permit to make these alterations. The ordinance prohibits dynamic displays within a 300-foot radius of a residential structure as measured from the center point of the dynamic display sign face. A variance is required if a dynamic display sign encroaches into this 300-foot radius. According to GIS maps, the residents at 280118 Yates Avenue north of the subject parcel on the opposite side of the street falls within this radius. The residences immediately north and south of the subject parcel are both set back behind the sign base, therefore they fall outside of this radius. The subject parcel has had a monument sign on the property since at least 2000, the year when the congregation received special use permit to operate as a religious assembly, based on photographs taken for that application as well as historic aerials. The proposed modifications to the existing sign conform to requirements for quantity, type, and dimensions. In addition, the sign must comply with regulations found in section 155-13.70 of the zoning ordinance in order to ensure that the sign is not a nuisance to residential neighbors or passing motorists. The proposed dynamic display would replace an illuminated cabinet sign that existed on the property. It is staff's professional opinion that the addition of a dynamic display, which conforms to the requirements of the zoning ordinance, will not have a substantially adverse effect on the locality. And staff finds that the applicant represents a non-residential, non-agricultural use surrounded by residential and agricultural uses in a characteristically rural area of the county. The very nature of a religious assembly building is that they are located within or near the residential uses that they serve. Therefore, that creates the hardship. And, at the January 7th, 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, staff recommended approval of the special use permit and the variance, and that was approved. Both recommendations were approved 7-0. And staff has received an email dated January 24th of 2020 from Washington Township saying that the supervisor and board of trustees have no objections. We're happy to take your questions.
Second.
Oh, no, I just,
We already made a motion.
I said, does anybody have questions?
Yeah.
All right, so the first motion was for the special use permit for the dynamic display, so all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The second, we'll need a motion for a variance for the minimum setback. No?
Variance has been
Oh, yeah, that's already been,
The applicant's got a question,
Oh.
yes?
yeah, sorry. My apologies.
Yeah.
Hey, my wife passed away a little over a year ago, so I wanted to update this sign that we have there to put in a new digital display. And I thought that would be a good thing because it's so much easier to change, to put different things on there during the week or any time. And it seems like everything is going fine. We got everything okay. But it seemed like quite an exorbitant fee, the $250, because we're not there to make money. We're a nonprofit organization. We're there to save souls. And that's our main agenda. So I would like to ask the board if they could consider waiving that exorbitant fee or maybe part of it or something.
Do we have a process for that? Staff for an application?
Correct, so the zoning case would have to finish playing out, of course. And then the applicant could request for a refund of fees, and our office could work with them through that process. It would be at the discretion of the board should they wish to refund those fees.
Do you know if we've ever done that before?
I know that the most recent that have come before you was the Creek Fire Protection District, which was also for a dynamic display. If you remember, that was sort of mid-2019, and that request was denied. That's the most recent one that I'm aware of.
That we ever approved it though in the past?
Very limited. I can't think of a specific example offhand.
And that was another government body, and we said no, so.
So, I mean, you can apply after, after us go through the process, you can apply for it. So, then you can, it'll come back to this committee, like go to the full county board for your refund fees.
And we'll get some information from you, then you'll send us. How do we go about that?
Staff will make sure that you get all the information that you need. So we'll make sure that you get it.
Well, I want to thank the board for considering it, and hope that it will vote yes on it. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, so that was approved, and the variance was already approved at planning and zoning. So moving on to case number 3, which is appeal of planning and zoning commission decision. This is 19-002 for case CC-19-068, which was a variance for minimum side yard setback from 50 feet to 20 feet, variance for rear yard setback from 50 to 30 feet in Green Garden Township, commonly known as 10250 West Stuenkel Road, in Frankfort, Illinois, County Board District Number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appeal APCD 19002 is in relation to zoning case ZC 19068, which is in Green Garden Township. And that zoning case was heard back on November 19th of 2019 at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. The applicant was requesting 2 variances, variance for minimum side yard setback from 50 feet to 20 feet over on the west side of the property, and then a variance for minimum rear yard setback from 50 feet to 30 feet. Staff had recommended denial of both of the variance requests, and there were no objectors that were present at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. There was actually a split vote count for the Planning and Zoning Commission members. There were 2 commissioners who voted to approve the requests, 3 commissioners voted to deny, and 1 commissioner abstained. The applicant is now appealing that decision of the Plan Commission denial of those 2 variance requests. I can answer any question that you may have.
Questions? Okay, so we did have 2 people sign up to speak on this. Richard Kavanaugh, you want to write him down?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Richard Kavanaugh. I'm an attorney with offices at 111 North Ottawa Street. I'm here because my partner, Tom Osterberger, who is representing Mr. Denton, is on vacation and, in fact, out of the country. And so, obviously, cannot be here. I have some handouts that I'd like to present to the members of the Land Use and Development Committee. And I'd be asking you folks, if you would, to follow along with me as we go through this field.
I have one.
Okay, stand.
This is a split-zoned parcel. The south end, as you look at, this drawing, which gives the elevations, okay? The south end, including almost all the way up to where the parcel moves off to the west, is zoned A2. The north portion of the parcel is zoned A1. Mr. and Mrs. Denton bought this property back in 2016 with the idea of building their retirement home. They, in 2018, had this particular elevation prepared by MG2A, which is an engineering firm out of Manhattan. And it showed a location for the house in the upper left-hand corner. It showed a possible barn further to the north and left. That's where the two 770s are. It showed a location for a barn a little bit south and east of the house where you see 760. And 760 would be the floor elevation for the barn. The barn land elevation is actually 756.4, I think. And you can see at the lower right-hand corner, 754, which is the low spot on the property. This is property that drains substantially from north to south. And the first picture that you see here is a picture taken from the street on Sunday of the house, and you can barely see it. That's how far back it is from the property. So what I did when I took this picture, I didn't move any closer, but I expanded the profile on my phone so you could see the house. But what's important when you look at this picture is you can see the way the land slopes from left to right. And actually the high point on this land is about 772 feet above sea level. The low point, and the low point is in the low 750s. So, and at the back there is the A1 parcel. Keep in mind, we couldn't put a barn on the A2 parcel because the building is on the A1. Okay. The third picture that you see here is a picture of the 100-year floodplain. And you can see that it barely touches the Denton's property, but you can see how water flows south and east. You can also see a line here from the farm north. Water flows down that way. And in fact, the southern portion of the property is actually in the 100-year floodplain, right down here. Thank you. So what do we have? We have a parcel which basically is split zoned, A1 and A2. You can't build on the A2 a barn. You could build a house and then build a barn, but you wouldn't be building on the high point. Obviously, you want your house to be on the high point. If you look at the portion of the A1 that's to the east, and that is basically everything east of the house. That land is low. In the spring and summer, water stands there, okay? And in addition to that, it has a high water table. Mr. Denton contacted Mr. Denton first looked at the spot which on the map is noted as 760. looked at that spot for putting the barn. He took soil samples. You had 3 feet of good black soil there before you got to anything where you could put a foundation, all right? 3 feet of black soil. In addition to that, the water table is quite high there. So it's not a good place to put a barn. You'll notice on this particular drawing here, you'll see an area here which says septic field. Well, he actually couldn't build the septic field there, and the health department told him, you've got to move it. And he couldn't build the septic field there because of the water table. So he had to move it to the north and west about 80 feet. So where the tip of my arrow is roughly the center point of the septic field. So where can he build a barn? Well, you don't want the barn sitting in front of the house because basically it stops all good views of the house. The place to build the barn is to the left and above the house. Same elevation, around 770 feet, okay? The 2 neighbors who are most affected are the Plunskys to the west and the Steffuses to the north. You have a series of letters there. They were sent out to every adjacent landowner. Mr. Steffus responded, I think, from Las Vegas. He was in Las Vegas, but he responded to say, no objection. The Plunskys said, no objection to the location of the barn where he has proposed to do it with the 20-foot setback on the side yard and the 30-foot setback in the back. So I'd like to take 3 more minutes, just very, very quickly, go through the staff report with you. Is this a self-imposed hardship? I submit that this is as a result of the shape of the parcel, the split zoning, okay, and the change in elevation on the parcel, which is, again, roughly 22 feet, from 20 feet from top to bottom. You don't want to build your house anywhere where water is going to seep in. So the house is built at the top of the site, and then where do you put the barn? The barn is close to the house, but the neighbor to the north has no objection. The neighbor to the west has no objection, nor did any of the other neighbors have any objection. The application was sent to Green Garden Township. They never even asked for a meeting, okay? So we've heard nothing from Green Garden Township. There were no objectors at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And in my mind, it's the shape and topography as well as the split zoning which creates the hardship. As I said, there is standing water for a portion of the spring and a high water table to the east. You can't build to the south. The purpose is not to make more money. The purpose is to put a barn in that won't have problems once you start using it because of the high water table. So we're asking, and finally, the staff had the opinion that this could diminish property values. The 2 people who are closest to and whose properties we abut and request the variance from, both say they have no objection to the 2 variances. So we're asking you to overturn the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission and recommend to the full board, and we need 20 votes to pass it, that this be approved.
Amanda,
I'm wondering if we need staff to illuminate I'm not really sure why this failed at planning and zoning, just because, I mean, the adjacent property owners are okay with it.
Yeah, I don't think
It
they...
looks pretty well thought out here.
Yeah, I don't think they had the approval, the letter of approval. I know, and I'll ask Mr. Denton to respond. Mr. Denton didn't have an attorney at the plan commission meeting. He was here by himself.
I'm just wondering, like, what happened. I'm fascinated by their decision, given this, so I didn't know if staff could eliminate
We'll
me.
have Janine speak to that.
Sure, so at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, like we mentioned, there were no objectors present, and, as you have the letters now from the adjacent property owners. Staff, when the report was prepared, we were unaware of the high water table and some issues like that. So those issues were brought up at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and I think the commissioners were just a little confused. They didn't understand what was actually going on and the conditions of the property. So that's where the vote count came from.
But why is that currently then
Against it
against
still.
it still?
We don't change our opinions. So we do. we,
I made my whole day.
So we prepare our report and we move it forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and then the commission makes the decision. So that's really where it ends.
So this is where we can change the decision?
Correct, yes. So
Okay.
it's
So even if
staff,
this opinion did change, you can't legally tell us, you can't in writing tell us that it's changed.
correct, yes.
Okay.
So the memo that's prepared for you as part of the appeal is just informational, telling you this is what happened, these were the vote counts, this is what occurred. And then the appeal, the decision is up to the committee and then the county board.
As a board, are we able to solicit a new opinion with new evidence, or is that not something we can do?
Never done that?
I don't think so. Thank you. Thank you for that. This one's in my district, or all in my district. It's like a joke. I would support this variance change or whatever. I would like to overturn what the Planning and Zoning Commission did. I think that makes sense here. So thank you for coming in and explaining the whole story. It was very clear, and I just wanted to speak on that since it's my district.
Jackie?
My question actually had to do with the barn part. There's already a barn here.
No, that's the adjacent property, and that barn is actually
Oh,
about
that's so
400,
close.
about 450 feet away from his north property line.
Wow, when you look at this picture of the house, it looks like this pole barn is like right behind it, and
I
in
know.
between are some trees.
I know.
Is that this
So-
building, the 770 in the corner? Because that's what I thought those white buildings were.
Yeah,
No, those white, there's no barn there now.
that's where he's
They're
proposing.
on, those are these buildings up here, north, way north, it's about 500.
No, look at this one, you see
That's
some little boxes?
the proposed barn.
Okay, that is the proposed
That's the
barn.
The
proposed.
760 is
That's the proposed,
proposed barn, down
No,
here.
No.
760 was,
770 is.
he looked at two possible places for a
Okay.
barn.
That had the mushy black
That had
soil,
the-
bad idea.
Right, and so he didn't, he excavated there, found he had 3 feet worth of good black soil, okay, but a high water table. So then he went to this second alternative, which is the one to the northwest.
Okay, so this is the neighbor's yard,
That's
so
the-
this spot
this
here
is
is
where
where the barn would go. So the
Exactly.
house is back here somewhere.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, now I understand the drawing much better, the picture much better.
Any other questions?
I'm in favor.
All right, any other questions? Do we need 2 different votes or just one? For the side and the back, or can we do it on one?
I would suggest 2 because you vote
That's
on
what I
2.
suggest. All right, so first we'll need, let me pull this back up. First, we're going to need a motion for to overturn the Planning and Zoning Commission for the variance side yard setback from 50 to 20, which is on the west side.
Motion. Second.
So yes, we'll overturn, so we'll do a roll call.
Tyler Markham?
Yes.
Mark Ferry?
Yes.
Steve Valich?
Yes.
Amanda Cook?
Yes.
Jacqueline Trenier?
Yes.
Rachel Ventura?
Yes.
and Tom Weigel.
Yes.
All right, and then we're going to need a motion to approve the appeal for the variance for minimum rear yard setback from 50 feet to 30 feet.
Motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We can do- All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Yep.
This will go to the board just a week from
A
Thursday.
week from Thursday.
Right. Thank you.
All righty, next up we have number 4, which is appeal of planning and zoning 20-001 for zoning case ZC-19-074, which is a variance for maximum number of animal units allowed in A2 zoning district from 6 to 18 in Green Garden Township, commonly known as 8527 West Drail Road in Frankfort, Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had sent out late yesterday and put a copy at each one of your positions there at the dais. So the applicant has retained an attorney, and that attorney sent me an email yesterday requesting that this matter be tabled until the April Land Use and Development Committee meeting.
Motion to table.
Second.
Moved and seconded to table. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have other business. Number 1, request for refund of fees for zoning case ZC-19-079. Who wants this?
So as we were just talking about a request for refund of fees, so we have a request here in relation to a zoning case ZC-19-079 that actually did not go to public hearing. The background story on this case is that they needed a variance for their property to bring it into compliance. The applicant, they applied for it, they were going through the process. Staff was doing research to prepare the staff report as part of the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. And we contacted the Mapping and Planning Division here at the Supervisor of Assessments just to get the history on the parcel and how it came to be. It was at that time that Mapping and Planning staff realized they had sent us the wrong information. So the applicant did not need the variance. Their parcel was what we call legal non-conforming or grandfathered in, and the variances were not required. Unfortunately, the information for the public hearing, including the newspaper publication, had already been done. So we could not administratively, we don't have the authority to administratively just refund those fees. So that is why this request for refund of fees is before you today.
What was the cost of that publication?
Well, they're requesting, the land use staff, we have paid for that publication, but the application fees, the five,
No, I know it's $550, but what was our cost to do that? You're saying that something had already been,
it's usually like $150 to $200 for that newspaper publication fee.
are we able to refund some of the fees, or is it all or nothing? Like, what's our capabilities here?
We already paid for that publication.
No, I know. So what I'm trying to figure out is if he wants $550 back, but we paid $100, maybe we give him $450 back. I mean, I'm just asking, is that
Or if he
possible?
wants
I'm
to
not saying
raise
that's what we
more.
want to do, but I'm just saying, what are our options here? Is it all or nothing?
I think it's all or.
I mean, you have the ability to reduce the amount that you think is appropriate. I mean, it was a county error,
I mean,
so
this is our
it
bad.
seemed that it would probably be better.
We just paid the cost.
This is our bad, so we should be.
I think
we
she should get the
refund it.
whole amount, or
Yeah.
fee, whatever, the whole amount back,
I mean,
honestly.
I agree with Jackie.
Yeah.
they
I mean,
should.
Just to be fair, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you guys, but it sounds like it was also their error too, though. But he sent us something wrong, or was it 100% our fault?
No, it was all county.
Okay, all right, then never mind. Forget that.
Correct, yes. Yeah, we had just advised the applicant with information we received, then we received information that that was incorrect information that we
Okay, all right,
provided.
I got you. I thought you were saying they sent it first, but okay.
No.
He sent it.
I motion to give him his money back.
I'll second that motion.
All right, so moved and seconded to approve the refund. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Look
Motion
at us
carried.
giving a refund, write this day down in history. Not like it
That'd be
ever
pretty good.
has
I'd
been.
say go to it. Next up, we have our Will County Building Code update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just wanted to go over a high level of the building code update. The last time the county updated its building code was 2014, and at that time they had adopted the 2012 international codes by reference. We did make some modifications to the Will County Building Ordinance in 2018 dealing with expired permits, and then also not requiring permits for certain types of activities. But this endeavor that we're looking to take now is to adopt the 2018 code. So this is a bigger process. It's not a little minor ordinance revision. And the reason why it's important to update your building code is that the county is given a rating by the Insurance Services Office. They do something called a building code effectiveness grading schedule, where they come out to the county and they evaluate how much training your staff has, what certifications do they have, what version of the building code that you're using, and then they use that number to determine how effective the building code is in the enforcement of that code in that jurisdiction. And that information gets shared with insurance companies, and then that often helps to determine what premiums people pay for insurance. And the county is in at this point, that agency that does that rating is looking to evaluate the county again and assign a new rating for the Will County for how we enforce our codes and what codes we're on. So it would be in our best interest to get that code updated now so that we would have a better rating that could impact the rates of insurance that our citizens pay. So,
Do they do that?
they do it periodically. You know, what would you say, Owen? It's the first time we were approached in a few years about it?
Yeah, they, every 5 or 6 years.
I mean, like a month now, 2 months now? Like
Oh,
a month?
don't wait till this process
Okay.
is finished, but, you know, they are wanting to update Will County. So it's, you know, the time is right. Other communities in Will County have already gone to the 2018 codes. Yes, there's still some that haven't, but majority of communities are moving to the 2018, and then it won't be too long before the next cycle of codes comes out beyond that. So, you know, in this process, we're going to be looking at a couple of different things. Main thing is the 2018 set of codes, but there's also a few other changes that we'd like to take a look at. Owen is our chief building official and residential plans examiner, and he's jotted down over some time here that the 2012 codes have been used of some issues that we should take a look at to help make the process a little easier for people that are applying for permits. Also, we want to take a look at some of the fees associated with the building permits, and then also the contractor's registration ordinance, which currently is adopted by reference. We'd like to look at having that actually made, you know, part of the building code and have its own section in American legal. Because currently, like I mentioned, it's adopted by reference and it's a standalone document. So those are some of the things we want to look at. Next month, we were thinking about coming to the committee with a schedule of where we want to be and how long it's going to take. Also, you know, between now and then, if something is on the top of your mind today, start thinking about things that we could take a look at that maybe that you have identified or your constituents have identified as problematic areas. And we'd like to take a look at those and see what the committee thinks about whether they think a change is appropriate or not. We will also be involving other agencies, you know, the construction trades, building associations, you know, in this process. And if there's any other group that you can think of that should participate or be noticed of our proposed code change, we'd like to hear from you as well, and who those groups are. Owen, did you want to add anything?
I sent out an email to some builders to see if there was any issues or problems they were having, and you know, if they can identify any changes that we can make to make things easier on them. So we'll see if they respond to that.
Steve, and then Rachel.
Yeah, going back to 2012, I was on that committee, and I was young and dumb and didn't know how to move the stuff forward. But back then, I was working with the unions, and I had people from the city of Chicago, from Lockport, from Homer Glen. I went through all these places to find out how they do it, and everybody did something different. Chicago was the most lenient, but in general, we should be looking at repair and maintenance items on property. And I can tell you that when somebody knows that they're going to have to go get a permit, they think that, they don't realize that in unincorporated Will County, you go there and they're going to inspect the permit, that's it. They think they're going to look at their whole house. And people don't have enough money to fix all the things that are wrong with their house. So they don't want to get a permit. Then they go and do something, then there's all kind of problems. But repair and maintenance items should not be included. We should exempt them type of things. Like we did 2 of them, and then it stopped. But the reality is, if a piece of siding gets wrecked in a storm, how can't you just fix it? One piece of siding, we made it so you could fix a square on a roof without a permit already. But now if you want to replace your door, and nobody ever gets a permit, and you guys even said that. No one gets a permit to repair or, replace a door. It's just a bunch of hinges coming off. We should be exempting that stuff. Because even toilet, when you replace the toilet, that's okay. But now a chain in the toilet's a movable part, so you need a permit technically, right? So, I mean, this is kind of the stuff that we got to get away from. It's on the books. Get it off the books. We should just have all repair and maintenance items be exempt. And I'm saying minor repair and maintenance. I'm not talking about repairing an entire house. Put a whole siding thing on it. We're talking about our repair, a minor repair. So I want to make sure that's in there, because this time I'll be pushing real hard for that. And I hope I'm on that committee. I think we're going to have a committee, but I've already did a lot of research on that. And I still got all the paperwork, unless something changed, which I don't know. And we also know from when I work with the state that we don't even have to have this. We don't need to have any rules. And I'm not saying to do that, but we already know we don't need them. So when our former chair, or I don't know, Mr. Pat, me and him would go at it. We really didn't get along too quick. But the bottom line was, he'd tell me something, and he wasn't telling me the truth. And I find out real quick when I call the state, and I talk to the lawyers from down there. And so I know I have a lot of knowledge about this stuff, and I want to make sure that we go the right direction, and we don't have to have arguments at this board going forward on that stuff. So please put me on that committee.
So, Steve, I don't disagree with you on some of those things, and I think staff has told you that, we're complaint-based, so if no one's complaining about the toilet chain, no one's going to get fined. But it's state law, state statute, so it sounds like maybe that's something to bring up with legislation, because we have to adhere by law. But what I want
This is what it is.
So I wanted to address you guys about 2 things. We, on the Modern Housing Solutions Committee, have had some of the realtors and builders come in and talk about the reasons that it's maybe not profitable to build housing, and we need to move forward with that. Part of that is creating a process or a plan for this county to move forward that makes sense for, the incentive to build houses here. We did ask I guess it's the other part of land use staff to help us look through our building codes and update them. So, right now I feel like the right hand's doing this and the left hand's doing this, and what I'd like us to do is work together on that. I wish Martha was still here so we could maybe address it, but perhaps we could get like a meeting together so that we could go through some of those things. She's in the next few months going to be reporting to the housing committee what those changes might be. So it sounds like that would be very wise for you guys to attend. The other side of that too, when we talk about the housing and building changes, is I would like to push us more towards creating homes that are more energy efficient, which might be changing things like our R ratings. And I'm not sure what the 2018 building codes are. Maybe they're already in there. I know Germany has what's called a passive house, and so they look at how to create their building standards so that it is to the maximum of energy efficiency as they move into more renewable energies themselves. And so there might be some things from that, but if we're taking from the states or, some other guidelines, we may not have the ability to implement some of those things, but I think it's worthwhile to at least look at them. It would end up saving taxpayers a lot of money. Their homes are more energy efficient, they're going to pay less money in their energy and heating bills, and I think that's important too for taxpayers. So although maybe an R50 insulation is a little bit more expensive in the building cost, in the length of the house, the 30, 40, 50 years you're living in that home, the savings is going to be astronomical. So I think that is worthwhile of looking at some of those things, but maybe pairing it with what Martha's doing already, some of the research she's doing would really be worthwhile so that we're not both spinning wheels and going in different directions. Or maybe kind of reporting to our committee too.
Steven?
I appreciate the input. I just want the committee to know too is that in a typical process, whether it's the planning process or a code update like the zoning we did in 2012, we, in addition to involving different stakeholders within the department itself, we coordinate internally with divisions, and the staff internally is allowed to provide input to coordinate and review documents. So that is something that we do take into account as far as coordination.
Good. That's fantastic to hear.
And we got other committee members that have Judy?
Yeah, so what I want to say is, since my district is largely unincorporated, one of the largest, District 6 and District 2 have a lot of unincorporated land, I would like to see us become more friendly to the landowner, because I find that the process is very negative. Another part of the process is, let's say I want to fill up my coffee cup, so I just learned that I have to get a cup. After I fill up my cup, then I find out I have to put some sugar in it, and then I have to find out put some cream in it, put some coffee in it, and then taste it so it's not, make sure it's not too hot. There's too many steps, so the landowner comes forward, they think they have this process, then they get to the next step. Kankakee County has a different process where they kind of give everybody all the information up front. I forget what the difference is. I know that Brian and David know we have a different type of process than they do. But I'd like to see us do that, and I'd also like to see us make things so they're not as restricted, because we're very restricted, and I've become aware of various situations. One is this, it was a commercial kitchen, okay, a commercial kitchen in Shanahan, and the lady wanted to do it in the unincorporated area, but she ended up doing it in the village of Shanahan because we had too many restrictions there. I want to keep that person in the unincorporated area creating a commercial food kitchen because it makes sense, because we're going to be getting the development costs, right, and our taxes. We'll be getting that to us rather than giving us to Shanahan. So I think we should really look at the processes that anyone goes through while they're doing all these things. And so when you sit in a room, it looks really great, it sounds really great, but when you actually apply things sometimes, it's different. So you have to look at, oh yeah, it makes sense, this and that, but when you're actually doing the application of it, I think we need to look at how it actually impacts our residents, not to give people a free ride, but to make sure that our zoning ordinances, our building codes, everything like that is customer friendly. We should have a customer friendly relationship with people, to work with them. And you saw it in the one case today where land use made a decision. Well, maybe there should be a process in place like that. Maybe we need to look at, should certain types of organizations, such as Creek Fire District, they paid for the special use permit for this LED sign, right? Well, it's a taxing body. They get all their money from taxes. We're getting the money from them for this. So we need to look to see, maybe that would be a situation where we're not charging fees, or maybe we charge 50% of the fee. Those are kind of things I hope that we look at, because being on the board, this is my 7th year now. Land use is a big, complicated thing. The things that these guys do are not simple, and they're varied. They're varied in many different aspects. That's why land use is a very large department, because of the complexity of it. But I would hope that you guys look towards doing something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. I'd also like to add that from the perspective of a resident and a taxpayer, the feedback that I get, and one of the biggest concerns I have, I don't know where to address this, but you know, we seem to take the we have the home improvement designation, and when you get to that period of time where you have to replace your toilet or redo your bathroom, all of a sudden, it's not maintenance, it's home improvement. And from contractors and residents, I've been told, from the residents, I've been told that as soon as they discover how that impacts the value of their home and the taxes, many of them are just, they can't afford it, so they rip it all out and just put the basic in. And they give up that dream of having a few more perks in their bathroom. From a contractor's perspective, I've had contractors tell me that they're losing business because people are saying, well, I can't afford this, so I'm just going to replace my toilet, replace my sink, and that's it. And there are also contractors that come out now and they tell people that, you know, your project may have this impact. And then they go forward and then they say, well, I'd really like to have a nice bathroom, but because I can't afford it, I'm just going to have to pass. And I feel that we need to reevaluate that. I don't understand why an upgrade would penalize our homeowners and our residents. So I would like to see if we could take a look at that and find out, is it necessary? Are the fees we're charging really necessary to penalize our homeowners? And kind of take a look at it, because a lot of people, their values on their homes aren't necessarily rising. And I think our responsibility is actually to be good stewards to our taxpayers. So that's something I wanted to add. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, so next month you'll come back kind of with a schedule and we'll kind of get a...
Will it be a listing then of codes, or you'll talk through them?
So there is a list of codes. I can think of a few off the top of my head. Owen knows them all. And then there's also codes that are adopted by reference, like the state energy code and the Illinois plumbing code that the county follows. They're not a specific year. Whatever the current version is, we're required to follow.
But will you highlight the ones that
Absolutely.
are worth highlighting? And okay.
You know, all of the ones that you will have before you for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So then next up, we have a review of industrial zoning classifications. Who wants to take up with this one? David?
Based upon my understanding, I guess, discussion of prior commission or committee meetings, there was a discussion regarding adding another zoning district of a lighter intensity to the zoning ordinance. You know, it's going to be at the committee's, I guess, direction that we take to what you guys would, the committee like us to do. But I did have Brian just, you know, real quick, look up over the past 3 or 4 years, kind of, you know, from the light industrial, the I-1 zoning district request, how many we had. And, you know, this past year we had more than usual. We had 7. Years prior, there may have been 3, maybe 1. So we look at the volume that we've been experiencing on this. And of all the different requests we had, honestly, it's not that great. You know, then we look at that, okay, how many of those have we had issue with as far as whether or not that district is appropriate, and, you know, discussions of public hearing all the way forward. Most recently, the one, obviously, was like the one, you know, for today. There was the one most recently over by Plainfield, the gentleman that requested industrial zoning there. But historically, over the past few years, there have been a substantial number of issues that have come out of industrial zoning. Something that the committee should probably consider when, you know, thinking about what they want to go forward on this is, you know, is there an issue or a substantial problem that needs to be addressed with this? And then also, too, from, you know, our perspective, is when you add another zoning district, is that really something that's going to resolve the issue that's perceived to be there? When we look at a zoning request or a map amendment case, we look at the criteria within the zoning ordinance. And if there is going to be occurring a spot zoning, that analysis is probably going to be very similar, whether it's I-1, I-2, I-3, or a fourth industrial zoning district. You know, the analysis is probably going to be very similar. So, you know, if an area is predominantly agricultural, it's not necessarily any more appropriate to introduce a lesser intensive zoning industrial classification there than it would be to introduce an I-1, for example. Another thing is, generally, it's not, we always have to follow what the other counties in the areas do, but I looked at the other area counties as well, and quite honestly, Will County has 3, industrial classifications. A lot of the other area Colorado counties have 2. It's either light industrial or intensive industrial. So, these are some thoughts that I'm having, is from hearing what the committee is talking about prior to what board members have been talking about. So I guess from our perspective, historically what we've seen is that with introduction of the light industrial zoning district, there haven't been a lot of big issues except for 2 within the past year. And then the other question would be is adding another zoning district going to solve what the issue is perceived to be? Because again, in our view, that analysis is going to be very similar. I don't want to use the case that was today, but again, it's still a process. But again, if you have an area that's predominantly agricultural, an area where I-1 may not be appropriate, introducing another zoning district, maybe have a similar kind of analysis, because then you're starting to trend of development in that area for those types of uses.
Amanda had a question for you.
Yeah, I got it.
Can I have this?
Amanda first.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said
No, Amanda.
No,
I don't think
got
I
my
heard
hearing
him.
aid on today.
You can't hear. Steve, I'm going to talk first, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I actually talked to Mr. Moustis about this because he's been here a long time. And I said, how was this handled in the past? Because we've noticed kind of a trend where this is increasing. And he talked about Sonoris Brothers, which actually came before. I don't know if I just did a pre-application meeting or whatever, like selling that property. And that used to be like C4 or C5 or something like this. And through just a brief conversation with him, believe it or not.
Yeah, that's hard.
I kind of figured out, I wonder if commercial zoning might actually be the best route to go. We talk about these landscape businesses. Perhaps there was a time when this wasn't really needed, but I'm wondering if we can actually go back to what we had in, Sonoris Brothers was put up in the 70s, so we're talking like 50 years ago. But that would preclude a business from selling and then them raising the buildings and turning it into a warehouse, right? Because you really couldn't do that in a commercial zoning. So I think that the idea that it's like a neighborhood business, it's not a huge warehouse, right? It kind of fits the character and spirit of what we're trying to get towards as a committee versus an industrial. So I think I would urge the committee, if we could all look at maybe adding in a different commercial zoning that, as mentioned, could have a little bit of an industrial flavor to it, right? You're allowing bigger, boxier buildings to accommodate a landscaping business or larger equipment, but that it would not be able to be this landslide into huge industrial buildings and things that ruin the character of the county. So that's my 2 cents. I'm speaking for Jim today, so I feel like I should go on a little bit more, but I'm really sad he's not here. I really am, because we talked about it and I felt like he had some really good knowledge to drop, so hopefully he'll come next month.
Steve.
Yeah, what you just said, Amanda, sounds good, and I was going to suggest that, I like what you said better, but the other thing you can do too is the uses that are allowed in each of these classifications, well, we can add or take away from them easier than doing a text amendment. So if we added something in, and when we add something in, we can also say, and this means only this, no warehouse, or in the actual, when we add it in. So that might be even an easier way, keep the same zoning and say, we're also including this with no changes, exactly this, you know what I mean? So, and we could do a lot of things, but we're all on the same page, I think.
All right, David, Rachel, and Judy.
And I know it wouldn't be an immediate impact, but I had discussions with Nick this week, and just internally with our own staff as we plan for the next fiscal year. And the budget process starts April for that. We started actually thinking in March. And so the LRMP is one component of that, as well as a review of the zoning ordinance as well. And again, I know it wouldn't have an immediate impact, but the magnitude of what we're talking about, if we're going to be reviewing all different zoning districts from all different uses within those, may be more appropriate to fall into that kind of a project than an individual project leading up to it.
Rachel.
Okay, a couple of things. The first was you mentioned, will this have impact on future cases? I absolutely think so. We've already seen multiple cases go through just in the 1 year I've been on the board. This isn't going away. The change of how we zone things and the type of businesses that are coming to Will County, we're going to continue to see. I think this is thinking forward and being proactive instead of being reactive. I mean, it's a little bit reactive because the stuff has come before us, but we can foresee that this is going to continue to be an issue. So I do think that for that standpoint, it's worthwhile. I'm looking at the zoning. I'm not necessarily against Amanda's proposal of having some type of commercial. And again, I had mentioned before, it doesn't matter to me if it's an A zoning, an I zoning, a C zoning, but I do want to make sure that we're falling within the legal parameters of that. So for the industrial, that's pretty clear that it's supposed to promote industrial manufacturing and employment generating uses, and the commercial is accommodated to promote businesses and commercial uses between, in a mixed use development consisting of business uses and residential uses. So my concern with the commercial one is that it doesn't particularly say agriculture. And so, yes, we rezone things commercial, but my idea was that if we have something in the middle of an agricultural area, throwing C1 in there creates the same problem as throwing I1 in there. You're moving away from the agricultural uses. By having something like an AI category, an agriculture industrial type category, then you are keeping with the same type of feeling of that zoning category, that it's still primarily agriculture. This would be some type of industrial use that hinges on an agricultural use. So I don't know if you want to call it A3 or A, I don't know your guys' nomenclature on this, but the idea is that you would keep it within the realms of that, because that's where we're seeing these cases pop up, or on farmland that is not typically being used for traditional farmland. Whether it's something like, marijuana or cannabis is now a new thing we never had to deal with before. So how is that going to be zoned? I do think that, the I-1 initially, it says right in here, low impact industrial uses and industrial park development that have very limited adverse visual and operational impacts. Tell me one warehouse that falls into that category. It just doesn't. So the definition that we have versus what we're approving, it doesn't match up. So having, you could call it an I0, I suppose, where it's industrial use that has even less impact. Limited adverse visual, the warehouse is 100 feet tall. It's not limited. So I just feel like, what the idea of having like industrial just doesn't fall into some of these categories, like a landscaping business, even like a junkyard, but maybe that falls in a different category because of its pollutants and whatnot. But there are ways to create a category that allows for agricultural uses, allows for industrial uses, that does not allow for warehouse uses. And I think that's something that we should consider. So if it needs to be commercial, if that's the easier way to go, then I'm okay with that, but I have concerns because it specifically says residential and business. So it seems to me that agriculture, some type of A zoning or I zoning would be more appropriate. The last thing I would like to say, and I encourage Nick or our executive to attend, or maybe we need to set a meeting with them, but it is the will of this board that sets those policies. So even though Nick doesn't maybe think it's the best use of time, I understand that he's your boss, so if we need to sit down with Nick or Larry, I'm happy to do so, but I do think that, the will of this board, sets those policies too. And so if we feel that this would help solve future cases, it's important that we open up those communications so that we don't have roadblocks.
I'm not speaking for Nick, so he did not say this was not an appropriate project or anything, so I'm not trying to indicate any of that.
Sorry if I misunderstood that then. Sorry.
Any means, I'm not speaking for Nick. And I do agree with what you say about introducing the commercial maybe just as appropriate as the industrial. You're absolutely correct. What I really think it gets down to is when we're talking about what's the board's position on the agricultural character in the community. And when we, not everything within the zoning, like within the agricultural zoning district within the special use, but when you have an agricultural zoning, anything that deviates from the permitted uses and they're somewhat compatible to the agricultural uses to maintain that character. So then the question becomes is, what kinds of uses would be appropriate that are agriculturally related for either another zoning district, or would it be better appropriate, as Board Member Ballage indicated, perhaps is that something that's looked at where maybe the special use permits are expanded within the agricultural zoning district?
I think
Maybe that's an avenue.
Right, and that's what we've been doing, but then we run into problems like this, that when the company wants to sell or move away, we've given them, even though special use is temporary, we really gave them a permanent solution. Here's a building there with 8 pavers all of, they're not going to have to tear that up. So if it's more permanent, it really, in my opinion, shouldn't be a special use. It needs to fit into a more permanent category.
And the other thing too is that, we're giving you kind of I'm giving my professional opinion, kind of my perspective, and the history that I've got here for many, many years. But again, I do respect it is the committee's discretion as to where you'd like to go with this, and then we'll follow through on it.
Thanks. So I'm glad that you guys are going to look at that. So not only are we looking at new industrial commercial things, we're looking at ones that were zoned at in the past. Okay, so way back in the day it was zoned this, but everything's changed now. So when you're in I-1 20, 30 years ago, which you were, now you've purchased the property, it's still an I-1, you have all this new list of things to comply with. Although an I-1 back in the day was not what we consider an I-1 to be today. So I think that's a good thing to look at as far as that goes. And I think that we could add something. I like that AI or AC or something that, and we could be very specific, saying that this would be the type of things we would allow in there. It's higher than agricultural use, but you could do this type of thing. Because some of it, they're an I-1 now, but maybe if they were given an AI, they would not have to do all these other things that doesn't really apply because the application is such a different thing than a real I-1. Just because it's in the past. We have our residents who even if they own the property, they want to do an upgrade to it, then they have to be brought into compliance with all the existing things today. So I think you find some of that out there. So I think it's good. And if I could get you guys to send an email of the industrial zoning, commercial zoning to us separate, so we have to go through the land use website, that would be helpful.
And agriculture would be, I know there's only 2 now, but I don't know.
And agriculture, if we could get that, then we can look at those specifically, have that conversation, so that we can all understand. And maybe we come to the end and say, hey, I think we're good with everything that we have. So just for discussion. Thank you.
I'm still liking the moves this idea. I know, I'm sorry. I look at a landscaping business as a commercial business. It is a commercial business. I look at a truck repair place as a commercial business. I don't look at them as industrial. I don't really look at them as agriculture. So I really think in order to preserve the integrity of those zones so that they don't put up a damn 20-foot high warehouse, that we would be better suited to just add on to the commercial. So that's just my thought, because they are businesses.
Right.
People are coming in and buying a service from those proprietors.
So I guess that's where I would put up an argument to that, is that, so my brothers used to own a landscaping business. And when I think of commercial, it is people going to a business to purchase. But a landscaping business, you're not going to them, they're coming to you. And quite the opposite is they were wood chopping, trees that they took down, they would have piles of peat and you know, they'd have fertilizer, they'd have different types of stuff like that. They grew different flowers and plants on land. That's very much agriculture. So, you know, it kind of depends on what the landscaping business does or doesn't do, what they're storing, whether they're storing rock or stone. So some of that stuff really does fall more in an agricultural type use.
And if they are, like Johansson's Farms used to be before they became the Halloween capital of the world and the Christmas tree sales of the world, they were just literally just growing flowers and had their greenhouse, then I would say, yeah, that's more, maybe more agricultural. But it's still a business. They're still providing a service.
But farms are still businesses too, and sometimes people have people come out to their farms to purchase stuff. But so I don't necessarily think
it's not their main. I mean, they're growing or raising. They don't have a cash register. They don't have a list of customers necessarily that they bill. You know, I don't know. I just look at it differently. I think the commercial might fit it better because the instances that we're talking about, and maybe there's more. I only am thinking about the more recent ones where it was a tractor trailer truck repair place and the other one was landscaping. I think there was one guy that was building pallets, but he was like doing stuff way out of line. Yeah, I mean, you got another one?
I view it as kind of like a service-based thing, like you're saying. So landscapers, you know, frequently their services out, right? They come back to home base, truck repairs, the same thing. They bring the stuff there and you fix it and they leave. But I do think that it is kind of commercial, and it might be a commercial agricultural thing, perhaps if we're looking at a hybrid, but really they're providing a service, and so I don't think that makes it industrial. Their goal is not to employ people, their goal is to provide a service, and I think that we really need to look at the spirit of that, but we can get in the weeds next month if you want. I'll bring a snack.
I'm trying to fast until noon every day, so this is helping.
It's 12:05.
Yeah, we can break that.
You know, there's a lot of good discussion going on, but I think what from the department standpoint, we need direction from the committee as to, is this something that we would be looking at under a larger project holistically with the zoning ordinance at, you know, when we start talking about budget for next fiscal year, or is it something that is going to go forward now? And if it's, we need direction. If it's something that's going forward now, specifically what it is that we're asked to do.
I'm comfortable doing it holistically and looking at everything, but Amanda,
That would be our
I
recommendation.
mean, it seems to make sense to look at everything as a big picture.
I like the idea of doing it all together. We start our budget talks in May, which is just a few short months away. But in the meantime, could we get some of those supported documents about, you know, what our zoning classifications are now, what the purpose of them is, and perhaps maybe some of these historic zoning categories that have been dropped, A, what they were, and B, like why do we think that they disappeared? You know, because we don't want to go back to something that could be an error, but maybe it's cool again, maybe it's not, so we just need to know.
So by all means, and
I think that would be good to do leading up to, I
yeah,
guess.
and part of this, what we do is, before we jump into the project, we internally start thinking about what are the issues that we've been experiencing as a department, or what we're hearing, and problems that we need to fix. And so before we get into the process, we have, and that's part of the scope too. You know, if we were to do some kind of consulting services, you know, we use that as background information going in instead of prepared to go into a project.
So before I comment, could you answer a question? If we were to do it holistically, when are you thinking that this would be finished then?
You know, it's a good question. It depends on the scope of the project, you know, how it's defined. And, you know, it's probably, you know, quite honestly, would it be finished by the end of fiscal year 2021? It's questionable. I mean, it could be going into FY22. It could be straddling 2 fiscal years. I'm not saying this project would be as intense or as large as the one we did in 2012. That took 18 months, but that was a comprehensive revision of the whole zoning ordinance. I would not recommend doing a comprehensive rezoning where you look at every single parcel in the county and give it a different zoning designation. I would not recommend doing that as part of this. But again, the last time we did do it, it was 18 months.
So my comment would be, I think that there's no harm in working on adding the category now and then including it with the holistic plan later on. We're going to have more cases. I bet you next month we have a case on something like this. So, I mean, I do think starting those conversations, what I would suggest the board do is to try to move forward with adding this zoning so that we have the ability to do some of these, and then when it comes time to holistic, then we'll have some data to see, is this working, is this not working, how many cases do we have in the zoning category, you know, and I think that could be added. I mean, you're talking 2 years out, we could have a lot of cases between now and then that could have been solved by adding a zoning category. So the will of me, and hopefully we get some support on the board, is to do this before the holistic plan is up, and then include that with that plan later.
Yeah, so what I wanted to say is, so I was vice chair of land use for 2 years. Prior to that, I sat as a member of it. And when you have one large thing presented to you, it becomes very hard to really focus on it. And our land use team does the best that they can, comes up, describes the information. If you're going through so many things at one time, if you can do it a little bit more narrow scoped, I think that's a good thing. And as far as I'm working on an initiative outside of the county for agricultural sustainability and conservation initiative, and one of the things that I would think would be a benefit is to have some zoning classes so that there could be smaller parcels that could do some sort of ag-related business on them than what we currently have today. So it's something I'm just looking into myself and hoping that there will be support. I know Rachel supports that. So that's just my 2 cents, is that when we looked at it before, we had so much stuff before us, there's so much stuff to read. To get through it all is a lot. They know it because they've been doing it, they went to school to do it. We are all lay people on it. It makes it more complicated.
You know, I know we have to do something, but it might be the path of least resistance just to add another category into the existing zoning classification, and that would take way less time. And even though the definition doesn't fit, we say, I don't know which one we'll fit. So let's just call it A1. We say, all right, we can use agricultural, commercial, and specify what it is right there, and it would be a lot less time consuming and cost way less money just to change the category a little bit. And then when we do the zoning update, which we will down the road, we're kind of covered in the middle. I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but it might be a solution that we can handle now and get it fixed.
So that's what I'm suggesting too. I mean, I don't care what you call it. I've been suggesting a blend, so that's why I say AI.
So I mean, if we did it right now, we just said, well, not AI. In other words, let's just say A1. We say, all right.
Well, not A1 because there already one that exists. A0.
Well, I don't know which one would best fit. I'm trying to say that if we're going to change, all we do is add a category to one of the existing zoning classifications and say, yeah, it's okay to do this in that zoning classification. We just added something to it, so it's going to be okay. And then down the road, when we go through this big process, we can actually fix it all. But for the time being, we would have a solution without making a new category. Just add it to one that's there.
Agriculture, it seems to be the one that has, all of these things have a connection.
Yeah, so if you had A1, just add this category to be an okay use for it. Would that make it easier for you guys?
If the board said we'd like to create an A3 that has some of the things that we've talked about today, would that be enough moving forward?
I mean, none of this is going to guarantee that municipalities aren't going to object to us anyways, because that's where all of our problems are coming up, is butting up against municipalities and their planning area. So this isn't necessarily, we can make all the zones that we want. That doesn't mean that they're going to stop objecting to it. It's still going to be a little bit of an issue, but I mean, I think if we do it holistically, we can kind of include the municipalities and kind of
We
make
have
sure.
to do a public hearing regardless, right? Whether we do it all together or similar. I mean, I'm with Judy on this. I think by focusing on the problem at hand, you know, it doesn't get washed up in all of the other stuff.
For me, it's we're running into problems in municipalities. I mean, but
adding another classification, you're still going to have jurisdictional review. But again, we're looking at the committee's direction as to what the desire is.
I would agree with the limited scope. I don't think we need to do a big full-blown study of all of our classifications.
All right, so those are what we'll do. Well, who is in favor of looking at creating a new zone? Raise your hands.
Well, down the road, yeah.
I mean, like right now, like doing it now before we look at
Like what
it.
you're talking about. you
Oh,
added
what I was saying, just adding a category?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm
So
good.
who wants that? All right, so you got your direction there. All right. So then that concludes that. So moving on, we have reports, communications, and correspondence. I have nothing, committee members.
I just have one comment. I've been thinking about the church situation today with the dynamic sign, and I'm wondering if we could add like 5-foot grace, like a grace period on a library book that's due, you get an extra day without a fine. If we, 5 feet, this was 4 feet, I think I do agree with them that this was quite a process and fairly expensive for them, I'm sure, to go through for 4 feet. I like the idea of the 300 feet, I stand behind it, but I'm just wondering if somebody is within 5 feet, which is shorter than me even, and I'm not that tall, that we might say, let's just, if it fits all the requirements, it's not going to bother anybody, like, let's just let it go with that 5-foot grace.
Like staff could make, you mean, like staff?
Yeah, staff could make that determination after they did
That
the
would be
report.
David?
My only thought is, Amanda, what if the next one comes up and it's a 6-foot variance?
6 foot, you're going to have to come back, but I do think that 5, maybe 10 feet, maybe, that would let staff kind of direct me on that a little bit, but I do think that, 4 feet is pretty darn short.
When you're going like that, what if we rather than a footage, you gave like a 5% variance?
But that could get really big if you have a large property.
Let's see what David
Let's see what
has.
staff says, though, about my...
The zoning ordinance allows the maximum administrative discretion under state law currently,
Which is,
10%.
Okay, see, and I was saying 10%.
so why did this one come before us as the staff choosing it?
We don't choose any of these. The applicant chooses.
No, I mean, so what she's saying is staff could make that recommendation instead of putting it in front of the board. And
Make
so
it
David, you're saying,
Cut costs.
you're saying that you had the ability to do so under state law?
I don't know the specifics of this case. The state law allows an administrative variance of up to 10% of the numerical value, correct?
Correct.
So he could have gotten a 30-foot variance without coming.
It's more complicated than that.
Oh.
Because in an administrative variance procedure, if one neighbor objects, because you still have to notify people, if one just submits an objection, it's done. You don't get it, and now they gotta apply for the other thing. So now they pay the fee for that, and they gotta pay the fee for
But
this.
like in this case, nobody objected. Could you guys have made that call without putting it in front of us, or why did it come in front of us? Have it? I mean,
We don't know if somebody's going to object before a case is submitted.
Yeah,
We don't know.
so if they did it before, they'd have to determine that they want
Yeah,
to.
you have to go through the
It's a
process.
different process, so.
Okay, so from day one, you'd have to decide if it was an administrative or, but back to my original point, is it possible for us as a board to say, and I wouldn't do this for buildings, but I think with these sign displays, I mean, if it's less than 5 feet, I mean, are we really going to get that weird with it? I feel terrible that a church came in here and paid that money for 4 feet. It's unduly prohibitive in the church's weird way. It's a sign, it's a very movable object.
I keep pushing my button.
No.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in this instance, you are correct. So an administrative adjustment would allow for up to 270 feet for that variance that we could have approved administratively in our office. There are situations, though, where the applicants are already requesting zoning action, or they already need a standard variance, that we tack on an additional variance because it's actually cheaper for them to do it that route. So while they may be able to be approved administratively, it actually works out to their benefit just to go forward because you're already going to public hearing. So for this instance, the applicant could have pursued just the administrative adjustment for that setback variance. They were already going forward with the special use permit, so staff had it going together at the same time as part of one zoning case.
Is it cheaper, like if they didn't need the special use, is it cheaper for them to do the administrative request, or is it cheaper to do the variance request?
So an administrative adjustment is $200. A variance request is $550 for the first, but then it's $100 for each additional one. So sometimes if you have the one, you have multiple variance requests, for an example, then getting that $100 is going to be cheaper than the $200.
So he was asking for $250.
I don't know what he was referring to for the $250. Their actual fees that they paid, I think, was like $1,400. I can't remember. I don't know offhand, but I don't know what he was talking about with $250, honestly. Because what he would be putting forward as part of his request for refund of fees would be his application fee, which was like, maybe. I don't know offhand.
So even if it was administratively adjusted, you're still paying $200.
Exactly correct. Yeah.
But just note too, is in 2012, one of the things we tried to do was, remove barriers, particularly with sustainable development. And so part of that process was making sure that the ordinance allowed for administrative discretion as much as possible under state law.
I believe we still have a separation of church and state in this country. And if we start giving special dispensation to churches, we are going down a very slippery slope. And that being the case, then what's to say some other not-for-profit doesn't also deserve a variance for free, refund of fees, or whatever other thing. I get it, I do, but
I agree with you. I mean, I'm going to vote no for the refund. That's it. But I'm just saying in the future, when it's such a small amount.
couldn't we just do it in the
Right.
office?
Not because
even
it's a
go
church.
this way?
That's not what's pulling on my heartstrings. Pulling on me is that I feel bad it was less than 5 feet. That's crazy small.
One could argue they could have moved their sign back 4 feet. It was a stone one. I wouldn't have suggested that in this case. I think we did the right thing. But the lawyer brought up earlier, is this a brought on hardship by the owner?
And it was. They made the decision to put in a dynamic sign versus their static one, and, there's a cost to upgrade that. I mean, we have to deal with it at the county, we just got upgraded iPads. I mean, there's a cost to moving forward, and it is what it is.
David?
And I'll be brief and then we'll get on here. One of the reasons why it's very hard to pass in zoning with administrative discretion is to make sure that everybody's treated equitably and fairly, and that it's the way it is. And so that if there's any deviation from that, that's where it comes to the board, for the board's discretion, where you guys can make decisions that we can't. So.
Any other committee members? All right, David. Anything else?
Good.
All right.
Right?
Oh yeah, Brian. Sorry, I forgot.
Lunchtime.
All right, I'll try to be brief. In 2017, the county board approved a special use permit for 2 things: for exotic animals and for animal care and boarding on a property out of eastern Will County. We've had several complaints since that time about the property owner not complying with the conditions. We've tried to work with the property owner to get them to comply with conditions, which includes obtaining building permits, which the main thing with those is electrical issues, and where the building is being occupied at times by school children and other organizations bringing, doing field trips to the property, and including being open to the general public. And they've been using a building where they're running extension cords all over to run their electricity. So we've had several complaints. We've tried to work with the property owner many times to get them to comply over the years. They have not complied. We're at a point where If they're going to not comply with the conditions of the special use that the county board approved, is that we'd like to move for the reversion process and take the special use permit away. What I'm asking you today is, are you okay to have that assigned to the committee for next month to discuss removing the special use permit? And eventually that would have to go to the county board for approval. And if we do that, then we would, provide notice to the property owner that that would be happening.
Just one question, do we need a supermajority from the county board on that?
We're just looking, it would be an ordinance of the county
Just
board.
a normal majority?
A majority vote.
What district is this in?
It's in Crete. It's
District 1?
District 1.
It's not a zoo? I mean, they've got field trips? What's the...
The schools come to the property from time to time during like the fall season. They do, what do you want to call them, like the fall festival, harvest type stuff. And then in winter, they also do Christmas tree sales.
It's like Johansson's.
And what's the compliance that they're not adhering?
They were supposed to obtain building permits for all their structures that they put up without permits. And
so it's not anything to do with the animals then? It has to do
well,
with the-
there's been some questions about the animal treatment, but in every investigation that the department has undertaken and talking to the agencies that are in charge of regulating those animals, including Will County Animal Control, they all have said that they're not observing any animal abuse. Now, I'm having complaints about it, but nobody is coming forward and saying that they've observed it. That's an actual agency like USDA or Illinois Department of Agriculture or Will County Animal Control. So I've heard those allegations, but it hasn't panned out. They have the proper licenses that they need to operate their facility and be in compliance with the special use permits, but their building code stuff has not been addressed. And we did meet, I sent the certified letter in November saying that we have to wrap this up, we got to finish these inspections. And that was after a couple rounds of complaints where we tried to access the property and they wouldn't grant us access. Finally, we were able to get access. We pointed out everything that needed to be corrected. We gave them a deadline to correct it. They didn't correct it, so we're just going down the road of non-compliance, and it could be a hazard to children, to other people that are accessing the property if it's not meeting the building code.
Yeah, so that's my district, fully aware, and that the organization there, they do animal rescue, things like that, but they do not want to follow these things, and those are things that they really should do, not just for the benefit of the people, the animals, everybody there, and so they are difficult to work with. I have to agree with Brian on that.
So I think we're good with having a sign for next month. We're going to start that process.
So, Mr. Chairman, will you do that? Or do you
I'll talk to him.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
So then we don't have two.
Yeah. I got it, just fine. Is there any public comment? Right?
No.
Public comment. We don't need any executive session, so I'll take a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.